The final chapter of the Vallow Daybell saga, the so-called Doomsday Mom, face-to-face with her former nephew-in-law Brandon Boudreaux, the victim of what prosecutors call attempted murder, a shooting from a Jeep in Gilbert outside Boudreaux's home, the bullet missing by inches, changing his life forever. Now convicted murderer Lori Daybell defends herself once again in court. Will she be found guilty for a third straight time? I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. The final chapter of a years-long, bizarre, and deadly saga, the Vallow Daybell case. Here we are, opening statements completed today. Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum, joined by Special Projects executive producer George Obi, and this is, if you're keeping count, the second time Lori Vallow Daybell has done opening statements. Both opening statements by prosecution and defense seem to run a little shorter than the last time. Obviously, the last trial, Charles Vallow's murder, life insurance money, dark spirits, J.J. Vallow, Tylee Ryan at the scene, a lack of calling 911 for 40 to 45 minutes, just a little more meat. This, on the surface, seems more simple. A shooting, a suspect driving off out of a Gilbert neighborhood. But most importantly, the lone survivor, Brandon Boudreaux, taking the stand, the only one to come out of this, tell his story in a courtroom to this jury of 15. And Lori does opening statements and says she maintains her innocence.
She does. Obviously the elephant in the room in this case is the victim is still alive, where that was not the case in her previous trials. But then, of course, the forensic evidence in all of this, the shooting scene, the bullet fragments, we've heard a lot about that in day one. We're going to hear more about that. Her previous trial, we saw a lot of text messages, emails, things like that. And then, of course, setting up motive. We haven't got to the motive part of this yet. But the motive is a little bit different, I think, in this case than what we've seen in some of the other ones.
When the jury hears the alleged motive, just like the last jury, talking about spirits and Brandon Boudreaux is dark and that's... We're just getting into technical stuff regarding a shooting. Here's what happened. Yes. Police say this. Here's the evidence. Tesla damaged, window shattered, Boudreaux's 911 call. This is very normal right now. That's what they're thinking. This is a shooting.
Right. And if you're a juror and you're listening to this, you're like, okay, I get where this is going. Treena vaguely touched on the religious part of it, but focused on the evidence that she's going to present in court to not only put the Jeep, link the Jeep to both Lori and Alex, but then put the Jeep near the home where the shooting occurred. And that, I think, is you're going to hear a lot of that in the beginning, because I think that will resonate enough with the jurors to help paint this picture of, yes, he was targeted for, like you said, that allegedly these religious beliefs, these, dark spirit, light spirit kind of a thing, which can be lost on anybody, any juror. But Treena is meticulous in really setting up the scene of this shooting right out of the gate.
This is just the foundation. You're looking at Brandon Boudreaux on body cam and his ex-wife, Melanie Pulowski. She was then Melanie Boudreaux, and we hear about this person, this marriage, 4 kids, and an influence, Brandon Boudreaux says, an influence by Aunt Lori, who was looked at as a mother figure by Melanie. That's what he says, and then this leads to a divorce in June 2019, right before Charles Vallow is shot and killed, and he's having his own marital problems with Lori Daybell, and Alex Cox is the shooter. We can say he's the shooter in the Chandler case. Right now, he's alleged to be the shooter in the Gilbert case. And so there's going to be a lot that comes out, but 12 objections in Lori's opening statements. And these aren't supposed to be arguments. It's not supposed to be evidence. It's supposed to be basically a preview of what they will see. 12 objections right off the bat.
No surprise. This was similar to what we saw in the last trial. Again, another reason why our panel has said over and over again, never represent yourself, because I think these objections, they're not, obviously jurors aren't counting how many, but these objections will hold some weight with them, because now they're starting to get a window into who Lori is, and the fact that they now, if they didn't already know this, they know now that she's not a lawyer.
She's not, but they were told, follow the instructions, do not hold it against her, because she has the right to represent herself. But when you see this basically Treena Kay objecting everything and the judge having to right the ship, that doesn't help
within the first hour of the trial. We're not even a day into it, and you're already having to deal with.
So that's the impression so far. In her opening statement, she said that she had a great relationship with the Boudreaux family, including Brandon, and everything was just lovely back in the day.
Sure.
And also that there would be no benefit for her to harm Brandon. We haven't gotten into the life insurance motive that will be brought up. But, in this opening statements, Lori immediately pointed the finger at Brandon for accusing her and saying that she's innocent. Let's hear it.
The state has the burden to prove that a crime has been committed here.
Nothing?
And that I committed that crime. That is the way the law is written. I do not have to show any evidence or put up a defense. I do not have to testify. That is the law. The prosecutors from the state have to prove to you that I conspired, meaning made an agreement with my brother to murder Brandon. So you will decide. Right now, according to the law, I am innocent. I remain innocent until the state of Arizona and its prosecutors show you enough evidence to convince you that I had anything to do with this alleged crime. And I want you to look carefully and determine if this event was a crime at all. Did a shooting actually occur? Only Brandon claims that it did. Only Brandon names me and Alex.
And as we would see as Brandon took the stand after opening statements, a lot of evidence shown, including the 911 call that we've heard before, the fear in his voice, and really just being out of sorts, overwhelmed. And we're going to get a look at the map of the area as he drove to the pool area and explained what he did. He didn't just go park in his garage. He drove around a little bit and basically followed this car. He wasn't sure who was in there at the time. He may have had a weird feeling, but he's not thinking, wow, I know who's coming after me. I have enemies, all over the place. He didn't have any idea.
No, he described in great detail today about what he saw, which is a pretty good memory considering this was 6 years ago, right? Like almost 6 years ago. I think he's clearly had enough time to think about this. You talked about he's testified before about this case, but like anybody else, you notice things aren't right in your neighborhood, you tend to pay attention, and I think that that kind of testimony resonates well with any juror, but also this is the prosecution's kind of, again, they started with him for a reason, because this is the guy who's at the scene. This is the guy who remembers in great detail what happened. And as I mentioned earlier today, you heard in his voice when he talked about the fact that everything leading up to that moment in that day with his kids. And I think whether we hear that from him or not, or even on the body camera, I think you might be able to pick up the fact that it settles into him at some point that my kids could have been with me when all of this transpired.
The key here is what they're trying to display is the only person who initially had his address besides his landlord. He was renting this home after going through divorce proceedings with his then wife, Melanie Boudreaux. Melanie had the address. How did this shooter get the address? How were they, lying in wait, as Treena says, parked nose to nose with a white van, not parked like anybody would normally park alongside the way traffic is going in that direction. And she gives the jury a preview of what they're going to see as far as the digital evidence, just so much that they're going to see with locations, license plate readers that track the Jeep, the tinted windows as well. That was brought up a little bit, how dark it was. So this is just the beginning, laying the foundation down and giving people a preview of the data and Alex's travels from Idaho to Arizona. At this point, Lori Daybell has moved her kids, JJ and Tylee, to Rexburg, Idaho, and they were already murdered at this time.
Right. Well, we would learn that later. The amount of evidence related to the whereabouts of the Jeep, to the whereabouts of Lori. Look, they're going to learn. The jurors are going to learn that Lori wasn't at least as far as we know, was not in the Jeep, was not near the Jeep at the time of the shooting, right?
She was in Idaho.
Right.
Yep.
So,
But was she aware?
Right.
Was she aware of this?
And we know there's enough evidence to connect her to this Jeep. So I don't know, again, with Lori not having, as far as we know, any expert witnesses to counter what's being testified by law enforcement on that front, that's going to put her in a deep hole, I think, because they have mounds of evidence. We've already seen some of it in other cases. I don't know who she can bring to the stand to poke holes in this idea of, well, that may not be the right Jeep. Yeah. I thought the license plate reader comment in Treena's opening arguments was interesting because we know they are all over the place. We know from our coverage and other stories that law enforcement utilize these all the time. They can track vehicles, whether it's from a hit and run. I mean, these are cameras readily available to the public, but these are cameras that are in intersections, and they will scan not only the license plates, car makes, they can go back and pinpoint down to the second which vehicle goes through which intersection. And in some cases, the cameras are good enough to where they can not only see the license plate, but in theory, as if anybody who's gotten a photo radar ticket, they can see who's driving.
Let's take a listen to Brandon describing that moment where he saw that gun flash.
So you said you saw the rear window open.
Yes.
Is that sort of the window that normally the tire would block from opening?
Yes.
Did you see any hands or anything pushing it open?
I can't say I did. It was, the windows were dark, and I remember it lifting, and I remember seeing a muzzle.
Let's talk about the muzzle. Could you tell, like, was it a handgun muzzle, a rifle muzzle? What are we talking about?
It looked like a rifle or a long gun, yes. Also, possibly like there was a silencer on it or a suppressor or something, because I remember the muzzle looked a little bit awkward at the end.
So when you saw this, what did you think it was, the muzzle that you saw?
I mean, you had a very short window, but it looked like a rifle to me with maybe a suppressor or something on it.
Okay, so it was able to come out of the window enough that it looked like a rifle to you. You said you heard something. Can you describe that for us?
It's a loud bang. It's gunshot. That's the only thing I can think of.
And you've heard gunshots before?
Lots of gunshots, yeah.
So you hear this and you recognize that as a gunshot?
Yes.
Brandon's testimony it was clearly the longest of the day of all the witnesses, and this was just direct exam, way to get him out there in front of the jury to start. And then we were waiting for the cross. This is the moment. Are we going to see Lori Daybell interacting with her former nephew-in-law? And we find out, well, where's her investigator, Jeff White? She needs these documents and exhibits. She's not ready. And so already we have a curveball. And at some point, she's going to get her chance maybe tomorrow to cross-exam Brandon Boudreaux. But this led to having to get to the next witness. And so not only you don't have the cross-exam with Boudreaux, you expect redirect after. This threw things off a little bit.
Yeah. Brandon was in the gallery in the last trial for a little bit before he was removed for obvious reasons because of this trial. But having him in the gallery in this trial, had he not been the first witness, may have seemed a little weird. And so I get why they would have called him right out of the gate. Why not establish the victim?
Yeah, again, and would he be able to be in the gallery if he wasn't the first?
Right, and this is he is the case, and he is the only surviving member. So a smart move on that part. The wrinkle being that we won't hear from him again until Lori's ready. But there's a lot, I think, that we're going to get from this cross-examination, I believe, from Lori, whether that's more about who Lori is. We've seen her across other intimate members of this family in this case.
How does she conduct herself?
Yes. And whether she learned anything from her cross on Kay, and whether her legal counsel advised her to approach it differently so it doesn't somehow impact the jurors. We heard from some of the other jurors in the last case about how much that interaction between the two resonated with them. I don't know that it affected their decision, but those are the things that they remember. They may not remember, the jurors anyway, may not remember all of what, each detective or forensic expert says, but I can guarantee you when they know that they have the defendant cross-examining the victim in the case, that is something they won't forget.
And how do you not have what you need for your defense? How do you not have the exhibits or whatever you're trying to show to try and poke holes for a witness you have been expecting for a long time? So you're telling me that it all was hinged on where this investigator was, and all of a sudden there's no contact with him and they couldn't get a hold of him, and I don't know, that just doesn't.
But she ran into this with them trying to get evidence off of a drive in the last trial.
Yeah, that too. And subpoenas for witnesses. And
she has said it's been a struggle. She did ask for more time to meet with her attorneys during the lunch break. Yeah. That was granted this trial. So she has had an uphill battle in order to build a case, but she's got time on her hands to do so. Again, we'll find out more probably why this was such a struggle to get her investigator into court with whatever files she needed. But this is like you said, this is a common theme with her in these two trials.
So 5 witnesses total today, obviously not done with the 5th being Detective Ferrer. They went next after Boudreaux to the woman who owned the Gilbert home and rented to him.
Yes.
That was a quick testimony. They also spoke to the neighbor who was a witness and at the scene. And obviously it was very odd to people about this Jeep that wasn't known in the neighborhood and facing nose to nose with a white van outside Boudreaux's home. And then Detective Nolan McDermott, or Sergeant Nolan McDermott, Detective Ferrer. A lot of questions from Lori about testing and what they didn't test. Bullet fragment.
Yes.
If it was a bullet, the theory that could it have been a tire iron that did damage to the vehicle. Maybe if it was a defense attorney that was legitimate, we wouldn't be, as surprised at the questioning of that.
Or the specific a good defense attorney would have specific questions. Again, having spoken to maybe their forensic expert that they have on retainer, would have asked, I think, more specific questions about whether what they saw on the screen ballistic-wise was that caused by a bullet, could have been caused by something else, and then giving examples to maybe get someone on the stand, the expert on the stand, to kind of talk in circles. But I feel like she's just kind of throwing darts at the wall, see if something will stick.
That's what it feels like. Exactly. Darts at the wall. And if they confirm, no, we didn't test this, we didn't I think that's when a seasoned defense attorney almost plays up outrage to that.
Yeah.
Where a jury's like, well, yeah, why don't you do that? Because a jury, none of these jurors that we know of are in law enforcement.
No.
They aren't. So
you just have to cast that one sliver of doubt, and then it gets the prosecution on their heels when they redirect. Yeah. And we saw that with Treena. I don't think she was on her heels, but she went right back to this forensics and the little things about copper on the hole and stuff that would be technically correct to kind of bring the jury back and say, look, don't, forget what you just heard in line of questioning. Yeah. Let's focus on the science.
To double down on the evidence that this is clearly a shooting. Yeah. The glass in the street, the glass from that window.
This wasn't a rock on the street.
Circumstantial evidence is right in front of your face. And then even bringing up Alex Cox's Ford truck, what was in that truck as far as proof that he was a gun owner, and a letter from Chad Daybell, and there's things to learn more about Alex, who is the suspect in this case, even though he's dead, that he is the alleged shooter in this case. So definitely a busy day, a lot going on, present in front of the jurors and without the jurors in the courtroom. So tomorrow we expect to see this detective back on the stand for cross, because Lori said she had a lot more to go through. And then when she has what she needs for cross with Brandon, it's going to get interesting and a way to end the week. that started off with a lot of questions and a lot of delays. So here we are ending opening statements today. Make sure that you all like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on The Record.